My name's Bree Nicely. I'm with Appalachian Voices. We are one of the co-hosts for today's People's IRP hearing. Other co-hosts include the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Energy Alabama, Sunrise Nashville, Center for Biological Diversity, Climate Reality Project Memphis and Nashville chapters, and Vote Solar. But this is really your hearing. TVA is built for and owned by the people, so today is an opportunity for the people's voice. Here in a bit, Brian's going to talk more about the structure of today's hearing, but before we do that, I just want to do a little housekeeping. I saw several folks gathered up in the cafe earlier eating the food that we have. I encourage you to do more of that at some point. I think if you walk that way and to the right, or just
to the left.
To the left, okay.
To the left, and it's more or less right over there.
Right. If you go that way, you will find the cafe. The restrooms are also over there, so please feel free to go get some food. We have a lot of drinks, coffee, things like that for you. All right, also, I wanted to say that Congressman Steve Cohen, who represents the people of Tennessee's 9th District in and around Memphis, understands this relationship between the people and TVA. He has provided a brief recorded video with an announcement that we'd like to share with you now, and we'll go.
Thank you to the Appalachian Voices, Energy Alabama, Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Sunrise Nashville, Center for Biological Diversity, the Climate Reality Project chapters in Memphis and Nashville, and Vote Solar for organizing this important event today. You rounded up all the usual suspects, and they're the best suspects. I've been discouraged by the Tennessee Valley Authority's Integrated Resource Plan, IRP, which they really don't have much of one. Their process is inadequate, and I know all of you here today are frustrated as I am. Elsewhere in the country, for-profit utilities and their regulators are required to get public input. That's share data, and everybody thoughts are encouraged to be sought out, and they all help the process, individuals, companies, and not-for-profits. They critique their IRP and propose changes. Makes sense to get the most heads you can together to come up with the best policy. TVA doesn't do that. They have no process for meaningful public input, and Tennessee citizens and all customers in the Valley, for that matter, are being left out of the process. That hurts the people in the Valley for not being a part of the process and hurts TVA for not getting their ideas. TVA is a publicly owned power company. They don't act like one. Every other state has a state agency to represent the average residential customer in complex utility topics like the IRP. But TVA does not have to check their work on behalf of the average citizens. They check with anybody. TVA hand-selected people. They serve on the working group, and they will not disclose who is on that committee or how to apply to be on the committee. It's the TVA Executives Committee. They pick it. TVA does not have an answer to anyone about their IRP and will have the final say. That's the way it is at TVA right now. And it didn't used to be that way. When it was founded in the 30s, Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal, it was your utility. But now it's not. It's their utility. It's the $10 million a year people's utilities. It's the multi number of employees making over $2 million. And people don't want to release their salaries. This is wrong, unfair, and it violates the public trust because Memphis and Tennessee residents will be greatly affected by the IRP, which will impact utility bills, air and water quality, local jobs, and whether the lights stay on during extreme weather for years to come. Memphis and Tennessee residents have important perspectives relevant to TVA's energy planning process that should be considered legitimate evidence by TVA staff and the board. Not all of the brain trust in Tennessee is located in the TVA. Just like any other industry, bringing new perspectives into a planning process helps identify and answer questions that would not otherwise been addressed and overall makes the plan better. Memphis and Tennessee residents and organizations can help improve the IRP by adding their own expertise to the mix. That's why I plan to introduce the TVA Increased Rate of Participation Act, or the acronym TVA IRP Act, to ensure meaningful public participation in this process. My bill will ensure TVA considers factors such as resilience, extreme weather risk, and impacts to public health. It will also require that TVA provide to the public the detailed modeling assumptions used in developing their plan, including costs and strengths in the model 100 days before the release of the plan. My bill will also help improve governance, transparency, and accountability of our nation's largest public provider and will mandate that they take your voices into consideration as they chart out their compass for how to best meet forecasted energy demand in the coming decades. TVA exists to serve the people of the Tennessee Valley. not the shareholders, not the executives and the officers of TVA, but the people that live in the valley. And TVA should welcome that input. As I continue my work in Congress, I'll continue working to hold TVA accountable. I have from day one and will continue until my final day in Congress. I look forward to hearing from the expert witnesses here today, Dr. Elizabeth Stanton, Taylor McNair, Peter Hubbard, and Taylor Allred, and I look forward to a robust community discussion and listening session led by my friend, State Representative Justin Pearson. Thank you for all being here today and fighting to make your voice heard in this important process. This is Steve Cohen. Thank you.
All right. My name's Brian Jacob. I'm with the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, one of the other co-hosts for today. I'd like to thank Congressman Cohen for recording that video for us and for making his announcement of the bill he's going to be filing. That's tremendous. We have some additional recorded videos for this evening session, so hopefully some of you will be able to stay for the session that starts at 6 o'clock. And Congressman Cohen actually mentioned that Justin J. Pearson will be here in person as well for that, so I hope you'll be around for that. We do have another special guest here with us today. Ann Davis is a member. Oh, there. All right, now it sounds better. Ann Davis is on the board of NES, National Electric Service, and has an announcement that she'd like to make before I continue. So come on up.
Oh gosh, thank you, Brian, and thank you everyone for coming together to give TVA your input. We are trying to do that at NES as well, and I'm going to be here for as much of this today as I can. I also wanted to make you aware, we are putting on a conference at Vanderbilt Law School. I work at the law school, the Energy and Environment Law Society, called the State of the Environment, and it's on the afternoon of Monday, February 12th. It is free. There's no need to register. It starts at 12:30 with a box lunch. We've got a State of the Environment report done by Think Tennessee and Vanderbilt first, and we've got policymakers from city and local government and private people on a state of the land use and conservation. Then we've got state of energy. TVA and NES will both be on that panel. State of, water, conservation, energy, and then state of scholarship and innovation. It concludes at 5:30, and there'll be a cocktail hour. So there is plenty of opportunity to mix and mingle and talk to these policymakers, and I encourage you all to come if you can. So thank you very much for letting me make that announcement, and thank you all for being here today.
Okay, I'm back again. I've got a couple other things that I want to set the stage with before we get today's formal hearing proceeding underway. So a little bit of background. On behalf of the coalition of organizations, we sent a letter to the TVA board back in June to compare and contrast how the TVA self-regulated monopoly does resource planning as opposed to the way other regulated utilities in the Southeast do their resource planning. Then separately from that, in November, we sent a formal petition to the board that, number one, established that they have not just the authority to host a public hearing, but we argue that they have the duty to host a public hearing on matters such as resource planning. And number two, we formally petitioned to intervene in that process. Now, TVA and the board have not committed to hosting a public hearing, so here we are. We're doing their job for them. They can thank us later. Instead of an administrative record, today's proceeding will establish a public record. But we do want it to be as official as possible, so we've invited Ted Thomas, the former chairman of the Arkansas Public Service Commission, to chair our hearing today. I will now turn the mic over to Chair Thomas, who will reside up there at the chairman's table, and he can explain how today's session is going to be governed. Chairman Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you all for coming out today. As we said, I'm Ted Thomas, former chair of the Arkansas Commission. So I've got to do oops. Hello, is it working better now? Okay. I had that problem from time to time. I'm low voice when I'm not agitating, and it's very unpleasant when I am agitating. You can hear me when I'm agitated without a microphone. So I won't be agitated today. The matter I'd like to call our proceeding to order. The matter before us today is the Tennessee Valley Authority's 2024 Integrated Resource Plan. As Brian explained, I formerly was chair of the Arkansas PSC, so I've done a number of hearings like this in real life. I understand we're doing something different today. It's a mock hearing. What should happen in reality is a real hearing. But in that Representative Cohen's bill is not yet law, we're going to do this instead, and hopefully sometime in the future we'll have a real IRP hearing. What we'll do today is we'll hear from a number of witnesses and reviewing the presentations and the qualifications of these witnesses. These are the types of people that you would expect to see at these types of hearings. So now the folks who will address us will identify themselves, starting with Appalachian Voices.
All right, I hope folks bear with us. This is the first time a lot of us have done this. But my name is Bree Nisley, and I am here on behalf of Appalachian Voices. Other folks who are going to be called, make sure you come up to the mic and say your name.
On behalf of Energy Alabama.
Hi, I'm Daniel Tate on behalf of Energy Alabama.
On behalf of Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Brian Jacob on behalf of Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
On behalf of Sunrise Nashville.
I'm JT Neal on behalf of Sunrise Nashville. I'm JT Neal on behalf of Sunrise Nashville.
Thank you. On behalf of the Center for Biological Diversity.
Gabriella Sari Tavar on behalf of the Center for Biological Diversity.
And finally, Vote Solar.
Hello, this is Jake Duncan on behalf of Vote Solar.
Thank you all for your efforts to put this on. We will now proceed to hearing testimony from the appointed witnesses. We'll have 3 that are in person that will go first, and then we'll have 1 virtual person who will go forth. I understand some of, Dr. Stanton, I think, was there an introductory process for her?
My name is Bree Nisley, and I represent Appalachian Voices. I'd like to call Dr. Elizabeth Stanton to testify. Okay, before we get started, let's do a mic check. Does your mic work, Dr. Stanton?
Let's see. Is that working?
Yep. Okay. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Elizabeth Ann Stanton.
And by whom are you employed?
I'm employed by the Applied Economics Group.
Have you testified in other IRP proceedings before?
I have testified in several in the state of Indiana, in Puerto Rico, and in related electric planning cases in a number of different states. Florida, Minnesota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, several states in New England, as well as the District of Columbia.
Great. Do you have any materials or exhibits to accompany your testimony today? And if so, have those been provided in advance?
No, I just have a summary that I can provide afterwards.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, may the witness summarize her testimony?
Yes, please summarize your testimony.
Thank you. Today, I'm testifying about the structure of TVA's IRP proceedings. Is it still working? I see. Are we good with the mic? Is that a little better? I'm trying to get closer to it. Just gotta talk way close. This is about as close as I can. That is close.
I think need to mute this.
Better?
Yes, I got an unmute button. And I shouldn't have.
All right, I'll keep pushing this back up because it's falling down. So today I'm testifying about the structure of TVA's IRP process and how it compares to IRP proceedings in other jurisdictions. To begin, I'll give an overview of what IRPs are and what their purpose is. An integrated resource plan, or IRP, is a study used to determine how an electric provider can best meet forecasted customer electric demand over a set period of time. IRPs consider supply-side resources like central power plants and renewables, demand-side resources like energy efficiency and distributed generation, power plants. IRPs typically develop resource portfolios to meet specific goals, such as keeping costs low, minimizing risk, or reducing environmental impacts. The resource portfolios are plans for specific resources to be run, built, or retired. Also for resources to be purchased, all to meet customer demand. And to be clear, for those who might be less familiar with all these terms, a resource portfolio is just a list of all the resources: power plants, solar farms, energy efficiency savings, batteries, that'll be used in each future year, and it includes dates when resources will be built or retired. TVA is required to perform IRPs. The U.S. Energy Policy Act of 1992 requires TVA to provide adequate and reliable service to TVA customers at the lowest system cost by engaging in a resource selection process in which it treats supply and demand side resources on an equal footing, while accounting for system operation features of those resources like diversity and reliability, and the ability to verify and measure energy savings from efficiency and conservation. TVA prepared IRPs in 2011, 2015, 2019, and is expected to complete its next IRP by the end of 2024. The purpose of an IRP is to provide a roadmap for near-term electric sector planning. IRPs typically examine multiple potential resource mixes in the context of multiple scenarios of future political and economic circumstances. IRP modeling searches for the resource mix that meets any required goals set by state or federal law at the lowest possible cost for electric ratepayers across a range of possible futures. That portfolio is very often called the preferred portfolio, and it's the conclusion of the IRP process. The preferred portfolio becomes a roadmap for utility planning in the years until the next IRP takes place. TVA's IRPs to date differ from typical utility IRPs in not providing a preferred portfolio that declares a preferred resource portfolio that declares a roadmap for operational and resource build-out decisions. Instead, TVA's IRPs present prospective ranges from low to high for capacity additions and retirements over 20-year planning periods. The ranges provided are for each kind of resource, gas or solar, what have you, in isolation. That is, they do not talk to one another, showing the interrelationship between the levels selected for different resources. And they don't provide a schedule of proposed additions. TVA's large ranges for those resources are also detrimental to accountability. They do not lend themselves to any determination of whether, after the fact, the planning exercise was a success or a failure. Overall, TVA's failure to develop a preferred plan from its IRPs eliminates accountability. It eliminates accountability from all of the utilities' planning. An IRP is an opportunity for a utility to demonstrate that its resource investments made with ratepayer money
are the best possible investments, leading to the lowest customer costs that are consistent with overarching goals. Failure to make a clear recommendation based on IRP planning devalues the IRP, rendering it a mere thought exercise rather than a concrete plan for near-term future actions that can involve billions of dollars. What's more, often TVA's IRPs have not been indicative of actual planning decisions that have followed them. The 2011 IRP planned for no coal retirements whatsoever. Over the next 10 years, TVA would retire 9 gigawatts of coal. That's more than half of their fleet. TVA's 2015 IRP again underestimated actual coal retirements. TVA's 2021 announcement of its goal for net zero emissions by 2050 made its 2019 IRP defunct. TVA cannot meet its obligations under federal executive orders using its 2019 IRP planning due to the scale of that range of planned gas additions found in the 2019 IRP, which are larger than the scale for planned renewable additions. TVA's 2022 planning documents for the Cumberland coal plant retirements are not consistent with the assumptions used in or the conclusions taken from the 2019 IRP. The Cumberland Environmental Impact Statement makes a clear and compelling case for accelerating all TVA coal retirements. That case was not anticipated by the 2019 IRP. TVA's IRPs also include errors in modeling. TVA's 2019 IRP modeling process puts a thumb on the scale for the selection of gas-fired resources, effectively assuming that energy efficiency, demand response, wind, solar, storage resources cannot be viable components of a resource mix to replace aging coal generation. Some TVA planning documents assume that new gas generation is less costly than new renewables. Non-fossil resources are dismissed or severely limited before their inclusion in modeling. Instead of allowing IRP modeling to determine the best possible resource mix for ratepayers, TVA boxes in the model, limiting its options and creating a constrained outcome. Finally, most IRP processes also have a robust stakeholder process that goes beyond the listening sessions that are offered by TVA to hold a lengthy series of technical workshops attended by both stakeholders and third-party experts in electric sector planning. These workshops present and receive feedback on modeling assumptions and on planned scenarios in advance of the modeling actually taking place. Stakeholders may also request that the utility carry out specific modeling runs on their behalf. Listening sessions are not sufficient to allow full transparency and true engagement. A series of technical workshops improves the quality of inputs used in IRP modeling and allows the public to have a real role in using IRP modeling to find the best portfolio for ratepayer interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Their planning document indicates that they're planning through 2050. That's a long.
We've been told that if we give them 2.5 minutes to reset the church audio system, we'll all be able to hear a lot better. So before Chair Thomas asks questions of the witness, if you'll allow us to do that. All right, I got the thumbs up from upstairs. We're back in action. So I believe the witness is available for questions from the chair.
Yes, thank you. The TVA IRP goes through 2050. Would you please describe why utility planning cycles are so long? Because that's a long time off.
That is a long time off, and it's important to look out far, look out 20 years, maybe 30, but it's also important to look in a careful and special way at the next few years when the planning decisions are the freshest and this document is being relied on until the next planning period happens. In terms of looking out into the more distant future, the resources that are being built last that long and longer. And so in order to do good planning for how to spend ratepayers' money, you want to think about the whole lifetime of those resources and how they're going to be used. You don't want to necessarily be building resources that are not going to be useful in 10 years, but have a 30 or 50-year life. That's going to be very costly for ratepayers in the future, and call it a stranded asset, of course.
Okay. You referenced that there were a number of departures where a plan was issued that said one thing, and then review of the historical record shows that something different happened. Mm-hmm. In your view, is that typical in IRP processes with other utilities and other jurisdictions?
I'd say it depends a lot, and circumstances can change. You make a plan this year, and then circumstances might change wildly. A new law comes, or a new technology is introduced, or what have you. But especially in the 3 years following an IRP, I would expect that the IRP is mostly a very useful planning document. And I think that that's what you see if you look at IRPs throughout the United States, that in that short run, that the IRP, when done with the best possible information, and with an open mind, not excluding pieces of information, should provide a pretty good template for how to proceed in the very near term.
It's supposed to be a roadmap for future action, correct?
Yes, it is. And, things will change, of course, but for any kind of planning process, we want it to have some use, especially in the near term.
Now, you had referenced that demand resources and supply resources were to be treated equally. Do you think that's happening in TVA?
I think a couple of the other speakers are going to address that. Overall, supply side resources and demand side resources are both included in the IRP. I think there are ways in which, like I said, that there's a thumb on the scale for gas and gas only in the IRP. And the result of that is not just demand side resources, but also renewables, and also your flexible peaking resources that are zero carbon are all taking a back seat and not being treated with that even playing field, where what you want to see is to lay out the facts as best they're known in this moment, to lay out those facts, and then the usefulness of an IRP model, the actual model itself, is that it can take all of those facts, sort through them, and look for a best answer, right? Where best here is meaning least cost.
Okay. With respect to all source procurement, would you please describe that and how it could help TVA?
Sure. So with I think I mentioned at some point all source RFP. The idea here is that with an IRP, you want to start with an open mind, and then collect the best possible information to populate your model with. So that's what's inside of it. For certain things, like the cost of building a new resource, the best place to get that model is in the marketplace itself, to look out and say, if we were actually going to build this resource right here, what would it cost? And so one of the best tools for that is for the utility that is running an IRP to issue an all source request for proposals. And so they're asking private companies to submit bids, quotes for building whatever sort of resource would provide generation or would provide capacity or provide savings. And so that's what the all source means, that it's open. It's not saying, please send us all your gas bids, or please send us all your solar bids. It's saying, please send us all your bids. What have you got? And in that way, it opens up for new and different ideas for how to meet the gaps that exist. So then taking from the results of that RFP submitted by actual companies that are saying, we could do this, hire us, those prices and that amount of availability for the resources is then used in the model itself. And that can give the best possible accuracy rather than relying on price estimates that are national or regional or maybe well out of date and not really in the current context.
Yeah, because modeling is inherently unpredictable. If you have a real price, it enhances the quality of the model.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Any other specific recommendations that you haven't covered for TVA?
I have a few. I'd recommend a few changes for TVA's 2024 IRP process. TVA should be transparent about its assumptions and modeling inputs, both before the fact, before modeling occurs, and then after the fact, in terms of submitting a detailed technical report along with the IRP so that all the cards are on the table. Second, TVA should conduct an all-resource RFP, like we were just talking about, for new resources in order to get the most accurate prices and the accurate availability. TVA should select a preferred resource plan instead of just setting out ranges. It's that preferred resource plan that tells us what that clear roadmap is for those near future actions. TVA should set aggressive climate goals in line with the Biden administration's executive orders, and that would include achieving carbon-free electricity by 2035. TVA should plan to utilize the grants, the loans, and the tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot available there, and TVA should be working with those resources. And finally, TVA should provide clear, detailed information on its solar and wind sources, including specifying which resources TVA itself owns. This is an area that's often very unclear in TVA's reporting, how much solar and wind there is and who actually owns it. So a clearer reporting on that would be very helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
So normally what we would say here is, Mr. Chairman, I ask for the witness to be excused, and that would be granted, and then we move on. So.
Oops, I should have done that.
Oh, and Ted, if you can lean closer to the mic.
Okay.
All right, again, for the record, my name's Brian Jacob for the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and I'd like to call Peter Hubbard to testify. I'd probably say that applause is a little unusual in the hearing, too.
Peter, just lean into the mic when you're back.
Let me know when you're ready. All right. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Peter Hubbard.
By whom are you employed?
The Georgia Center for Energy Solutions.
Have you testified in other IRP proceedings before?
I have. I've testified before the Georgia Public Service Commission and also written testimony before the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, and then also before the Puerto Rico Utility, the Regulatory Authority.
Do you have any materials or exhibits to accompany your testimony today?
I do. I have a few exhibits that will be displayed on the screen.
Perfect, thank you. And have you prepared a summary of your analysis to share today?
I have.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, may the witness summarize his testimony?
Yes, you will. Yes, you may.
Thank you very much. I'm here today. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to speak to you. The previous expert witness covered kind of the ground around integrated resource planning. What I'd like to do with my testimony is provide a view of the over-reliance of TVA on gas-fired capacity and talk about some of the risks related to that that aren't being captured in the current integrated resource planning process. So I'll begin specifically this testimony talking about the stated plan in the 2019 TVA IRP. I'll talk about some of the differences that have happened after that IRP, but before this next IRP, sort of the planning process that took place. And then I'll also talk about a lot of the different risks related to natural gas. Technology risks, reliability risks, price risks, and other things that I don't believe are being accounted for properly in TVA's IRP. So let's start with the plan for new gas-fired capacity. In its last IRP in 2019, TVA announced firm plans to build 2 gigawatts of combined cycle gas capacity and 1.5 gigawatts of new combustion turbines by 2028, and then to also retire some assets as well. And you can see that on the screen in the first few bars there. But what they did subsequent to the 2019 IRP is then add a number of other gas-fired resources without the benefit of going through the formal planning process that we're here talking about today. So when you total those up, as you see there on that exhibit, it's around 6.4 gigawatts of new gas-fired capacity that TVA has either made a final decision on or is proposing to build outside of the IRP process subsequent to the 2019 IRP process. And so the challenge there is that this is significantly more capacity that was contemplated to be online in the last IRP's current outlook. So these recent decisions are not informed by many of the changes that have occurred in the long lead time between the last IRP and this current IRP. We'll talk about one of those key things in a moment, and that's the Inflation Reduction Act and the tremendous cost savings that come from that reform and those federal dollars. So I'd also like to just summarize a bit the process failures that took place that led to this embrace of TVA's natural gas-fired power plants. So in the, there's really a broad range of resources that were proposed in the 2019 IRP. The previous expert witness talked about how it wasn't really a plan because there wasn't a kind of a committed pathway in that IRP. It was a very broad one. What that did was that allowed TVA, that left the door open for them to say, we could build anywhere between 18 gigawatts of new gas-fired capacity, or up to 18 gigawatts of gas-fired capacity in the next 20 years. And that would effectively be half of TVA's current fleet being replaced by gas-fired capacity. Or they could build a similar level of solar. What they did was say we could build a lot of gas, a lot of solar, or something anywhere in between. It left the door wide open for TVA to choose the path that was most convenient rather than the pathway that would allow for the most affordable and reliable and sustainable portfolio. I also think the other important process failure was that TVA failed to listen to all of the experts and all of the stakeholders that are gathered here today to better inform the process and understand really what some of the hidden costs are that we're here to talk about and that I'll address in a moment. So let's talk about some of those. What are some of those risks to gas-fired capacity that we're talking about today? So the current plan to add 6.3 or so gigawatts of new gas-fired capacity creates a broad range of risks. One of the key ones is called stranded asset risk, and that is when you plan to build a gas-fired power plant that will cost 20 years to pay off the debt for, but the plant will last for up to 40 or 45 years. We don't have that time. If TVA's plan is to be carbon-free by 2050, those plants will not be able to reach the end of their useful life. We'll be paying for things that we'll be using for only a short period of time, but we'll be paying for much longer. That's called the stranded asset risk, and that's a serious risk that I think is being undervaluated in TVA's IRP process. TVA will say, well, there's opportunities to use other technologies like carbon capture and sequestration or co-firing with hydrogen you may have heard about. The problem is that a lot of these resources are uneconomic or unproven, and TVA is putting a lot of its eggs in that basket on unproven technology. one of the other really compelling things that I think is under examined in the 2024 IRP and Tennessee Valley Authority's IRP process is really the economic risk. And we only have to look at the marketplace to see that gas plants are being canceled left and right. In fact, a roundup of something like 68 different gas-fired power plants were canceled last year around the globe. And that's because the economics of gas simply can't compete with the low cost of renewables, wind, solar, and battery storage. And this is particularly true when we take into account the cost savings from the Inflation Reduction Act. It's also, I think, very useful to just look at other marketplaces nearby and look at the amount of gas-fired capacity that's being withdrawn from being proposed to be built. There's a tremendous amount of that taking place, in particular in the neighboring PJM territory. That's where, in the last few years, only 4 gigawatts of new gas-fired capacity was proposed, compared to 200 gigawatts of solar. The marketplace is speaking when we look at numbers like this. This is occurring not just in neighboring territories, but also in TVA as well. And we'll take a look at that in a moment as well. The tremendous amount of project developers that are interested in building renewable energy in the TVA territory. Now, there's a risk from building natural gas-fired capacity that simply won't last its full lifetime. And that's a good thing. We would like to retire fossil fuel assets sooner rather than later, but we also don't want to build things that just won't be used for the full lifetime. Now, another key risk to natural gas-fired capacity is that it requires fuel to run the gas-fired capacity. So in 2020-22, TVA spent close to $2 billion on its natural gas fuel costs alone. It's a tremendous amount of money that's being spent for those natural gas-fired generators that simply doesn't need to be spent if we're focused on renewables that do not have a fuel cost to them. The other thing that's really critical to understand is that the pressure on fuel sources like natural gas is only increasing as we export more of that natural gas overseas. You may have heard of liquefied natural gas exports. We're exporting a tremendous amount, 15% of how much we produce. That's increasing. It could double in the next few years. And all that's going to do is, as you send natural gas overseas, it puts upward pressure on prices here. So there's a real risk to TVA, and in particular to its customers, from the fuel price volatility and costs associated with fuel. And what's really important to understand is that TVA doesn't incur those costs. It passes those fuel costs 100% onto its customers. So they simply don't have an incentive to save. They're passing those costs on to you. And that's a problem because as we saw in 2022, prices reached an extreme level in the natural gas market, and those costs were passed on to you, the ratepayer and the customer. Now, there is a significant amount of risk that's more inherent to running an electrical grid that comes from relying on natural gas to the degree that TVA is. 38% of its capacity is natural gas fired. And when you add in the coal and then also the nuclear, all three of those are thermal resources. And there's a risk to putting all of your eggs in that thermal resource basket. So as we see more impacts from climate change, more extreme weather events, more drought, more heat, those thermal resources certainly feel the impact from that. I think many people in this room and that are listening today will remember the impact of Winter Storm Elliott that occurred around Christmas time in 2022. That was a signature event for TV, one of the first times that it had to initiate rolling blackouts. And that largely was due to the vulnerabilities of gas-fired capacity and the ability to operate in extreme weather events. And those are risks that are inherent to natural gas, where there has to be just-in-time fuel delivery. Many times when it's extremely cold, the natural gas is diverted away from the power plants and towards residential and commercial consumers. So the gas isn't there to actually run the power plants. So it's a real risk, and it's a risk that TVA is undercounting in its integrated resource planning process. Now, I just want to touch on a few more things. There is a lot of detail in the testimony we'll provide, but the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, is important to touch on one more time. What it does is it takes the cost of solar and wind and battery storage and knocks an immediate 30% off the price tag. If you're also procuring those resources domestically and you're doing it in a retired coal community, you could have 50% of the project covered by the cost of by the federal government through the Inflation Reduction Act. This is really a tremendous opportunity that is also not being utilized in the current IRP planning process. From everything that I've seen in reviewing the environmental impact statements of proposed gas-fired capacity. So it's really an opportunity cost here that TVA is not taking advantage of. Lastly, I think it would be helpful to also talk about, we did talk a little bit about the economics, and I should mention that if this isn't just my analysis, this is, again, the marketplace speaking. This is the Department of Energy's annual energy outlook comparing gas-fired capacity resources to the alternative to battery energy storage, and showing that today the economics pencil out in favor of those battery resources, and there's real value to the grid that's not being captured in this integrated resource planning process. Now, I think there is one more slide or two more slides we could advance and just show that I believe there's a good number of projects. This first slide here actually just gives you a sense of the sort of this is the interconnection queue, in fact, and shows the extent of the projects that are being proposed in the TVA area. The point of showing this slide is that there are developers, there are projects out there that TVA can embrace and move forward, many of them in an advanced state that can be brought online in the next few years to help meet some of the load growth. And those resources are clean resources that will save us money and help provide for a reliable grid without the attendant risks that we've talked about with gas-fired capacity. Now, we did also, I will leave to some of the other witnesses some detailed analysis about better pathways for TVA. But I just want to also highlight that there's lots of great analysis that shows that there's partners out there in other federal agencies, the Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratories, the Environmental Protection Agency. All of these are partners to TVA and can be, and help them to really go through critical understanding of the pathways to decarbonization that do it in a reliable and resilient way. In particular, the Department of Defense already has a 100% carbon pollution-free energy goal by 2030. And so, being a large customer of Tennessee Valley Authority, it's incumbent upon them to listen to their stakeholders and their customers and listen to what they're asking for. Now, just one or two more comments and I'll wrap up. It is important to note that the integrated resource plan is a snapshot in time and it changes. We've talked about the Inflation Reduction being a critical thing that has changed since the last time that's underrepresented in this integrated resource planning process. But there are a number of signposts from the last integrated resource process that the TVA really should pay attention to. The valley load growth scenario was a scenario in the last IRP, along with the decarbonization and the rapid distributed energy resource adoption scenario. A lot of these scenarios are coming to pass. There is a significant amount of load growth in the valley from all of the battery energy projects and electric vehicle projects. TVA's customers are asking for decarbonization, and TVA's customers are also interested in distributed energy resources. Think rooftop solar and batteries and electric vehicles. These distributed energy resources are a critical component that is under-evaluated in the integrated resource plan. When you all put solar and batteries on your roof, that helps the entire grid to meet its electrical needs, and it helps to lower costs for everyone else. So it's a tremendous value that TVA is simply under-accounting for, and that's a process failure that can be remedied. And it's another critical reason why TVA should include stakeholders and experts in its planning process. So I'll conclude with that and just really emphasize that, again, that distributed energy resources are a key resource that is underaccounted for. And then there's also an over-reliance of TVA on gas-fired capacity that's creating a host of risks, a few of which we've talked about today, that are just underaccounted for by TVA's planning process. And so, in conclusion, there's improvements to be made, and it's critical that TVA put the due diligence into its integrated resource process so that the best plan can be produced for TVA to reach its decarbonization goals. So that's it, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, these folks here don't get a bill from TVA, but how do TVA costs find their way into the bills that they do get?
A good question. TVA is really the wholesale generator that then sells most of its energy onto the local power companies, the LPCs, who then distribute that power directly to you, the customer. And when TVA's cost to produce that wholesale energy rise because, say, the cost of natural gas rises, those costs are passed on to you, the customer. So it's an indirect way. The methane emissions charge, for example, that is something that came out of the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. That is the first time that there is a charge on greenhouse gas emissions. That's not a direct cost to TVA, but those costs for the methane emissions charge, for any leakage that may come through the whole natural gas system, those costs will be reflected in higher costs for the fuel that will be passed on to you through higher electricity costs.
How does resource diversity impact system reliability?
I mentioned that 38% of TVA's fleet is gas-fired, and 76% of its fleet is thermal, so that's gas, coal, and nuclear. The challenge there is that if 2/5 of your fleet is reliant on natural gas and there's a shortage of that fuel due to extreme weather or the gas being diverted to other customers, well, now you have a large portion of your fleet that simply can't perform as it did during Winter Storm Elliott. So by having an undiversified fleet that's over-reliant on one or two or three different technologies, and something happens to that technology that's correlated across those different power plants, it's a big hit for TVA. And it's a big risk to reliability, and we saw that borne out during Winter Storm Elliott.
Now, I understand there was an editorial by a leading person within TVA that talked about winterization and mitigating some of these gas risks. What risks do you see that cannot be mitigated by winterization of gas units?
Well, in particular, I talked about the fuel scarcity that can happen. So the winterization is great for that power plant there. But if the fuel can't get to that power plant because the infrastructure, the pipelines, the compressor stations, all of that infrastructure to move that fuel to the power plant is frozen as well, or there isn't the fuel to simply send there, that's a large risk to the TVA fleets as well. There's really a host of risks that I think are underaccounted for. That happens to be one, but there are many others.
Do you think participation in a regional wholesale market would be beneficial to TVA?
Yes, it would. The reason why participating in a regional transmission organization, a marketplace, is because you're able to share resources across a broad geographic area. So if it's cloudy in one area, or if it's extremely cold in another area, it's not always likely for that to be the case across the entire eastern half of the United States. It does happen, but by sharing resources across a marketplace, you don't have to build as many resources you can share, and it reduces the cost for TVA and for everyone else.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, may the witness be excused?
Yes.
Thank you, Peter. A housekeeping matter as well, Mr. Chairman. We are on schedule somewhat, so if you would like to have a break at your discretion, of course, now might be a decent time for that.
Oh, would y'all like a break or keep rolling? I think I'm seeing more keep rolling than take a break. Okay.
And for all of the speakers, try to keep the mic around 6 inches from your mouth. That will help with projection.
And directly towards your mouth. That was
All right, hello, my name is Jake Duncan and I represent Vote Solar. I'd like to call Taylor Allred to testify.
And you can adjust that mic as needed, Taylor.
Thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Taylor Allred.
And by whom are you employed?
I'm employed by Greenlink Analytics.
Have you testified in other integrated resource plan proceedings before?
Yes, I have, including before the Georgia Public Service Commission in Pearson, as well as written comments before a number of other commissions across the Southeast.
And do you have any materials or exhibits to accompany your testimony today?
Yes, I do.
And have you provided those in advance?
I have, and at this time I invite Ms. Lawhorn to bring up my slide deck.
Wonderful. And have you prepared a summary of your analysis for today?
I have.
Great. Just quick, how's the volume for everyone out there? A little better? Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, may the witness please summarize his testimony.
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the following testimony, I'll briefly offer comments on TVA's 2024 Integrated Resource Plan with respect to equity, environmental justice, energy cost burdens, energy efficiency, distributed generation, and economic development. Next slide, please. In my experience, IRP proceedings are particularly valuable forums for addressing these issues. As discussed by witness Stanton, intervening before state utility commissions affords interested parties essential rights, including data discovery and cross-examination, which TVA does not offer. This limits opportunities for meaningful engagement on equity issues like climate change and energy affordability. According to the United Nations, climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we're at a defining moment. From shifting weather patterns that threaten food production to rising sea levels that increase the risk of catastrophic flooding, the impacts of climate change are global in scope and unprecedented in scale. Without drastic action today, adapting to these impacts in the future will be more difficult and costly. Next slide, please. The Biden administration has also recognized the urgency of drastic climate action and has set a goal of achieving a carbon-free power sector by 2035. However, in a November 2023 IRP Working Group presentation, TVA included a graphic indicating a net zero energy aspiration date of 2050. TVA should instead aspire to lead the nation in meeting the White House goal. Mitigating the inequitable impacts of environmental and economic emergencies like climate change is central to TVA's mission. About 90 years ago, TVA was founded in response to another historic crisis when the United States was at the height of the Great Depression and the poverty-stricken Tennessee Valley was struggling with underdevelopment and frequent disastrous flooding. Literally and figuratively, TVA brought light into a time of darkness and transformed the valley and the lives of its people through electrification, economic development, flood management, and reforestation. However, TVA often fell short when it came to community engagement. For example, many people felt powerless and aggrieved over where lands were flooded and communities irrevocably separated in the creation of reservoirs for hydropower and flood control. Progress is not without the potential for serious inequities, and to fulfill its recent Equity Action Plan, TVA must do better in its 2024 IRP. Next slide, please. The Environmental Protection Agency defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. The American Public Power Association has noted that environmental justice is broadly defined by 4 principles: restorative justice, distributive justice, procedural justice, and recognition justice. Often added to this list is intergenerational justice. APPA further observed that community members may be able to identify alternatives, solutions, or potential benefits that might not otherwise be known or accepted by others. Next slide, please. A November 2022 op-ed in the Tennessean highlighted TVA's history of environmental injustices, including health impacts on remediation workers and the dumping of waste in a Black community following the 2008 Kingston coal ash spill, as well as a delayed transition away from fossil fuels, a lack of meaningful community engagement, and high energy cost burdens that disproportionately impact non-white and low-wealth communities. The article was written by Pearl Walker, who is co-chair of the Memphis NAACP Environmental Justice Committee, and my friend Michael Malcolm, who is the director of Alabama Interfaith Power and Light and the People's Justice Council. While TVA has made some progress, including establishing internal environmental justice teams and discussing the topic in its invite-only IRP working group, it has a lot of room for improvement and has not published an environmental justice strategic plan according to the Biden administration's EJ scorecard. In its 2019 IRP process, TVA did not emphasize environmental justice, which was only discussed within a limited scope in the accompanying environmental impact statement. Next slide, please. Through recent federal legislation, including the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which we've heard referenced a few times today, very important, unprecedented amounts of federal funding have been allocated for renewable energy and energy efficiency. TVA should seek to ensure that the Tennessee Valley gets its fair share of these funds, including tax credits for solar energy that are now available to TVA through direct pay. By pursuing new models for distributed energy, including community solar, TVA could enable more ratepayers to hedge against future rate increases. Energy efficiency has long been recognized as a least cost resource, and it not only helps to support low rates, but also creates jobs and helps ratepayers lower their bills by reducing their usage. TVA's mission requires it to balance the provision of low-cost power with environmental stewardship and economic development, and its IRP model should value all the benefits of energy efficiency, not just low rates. Next slide, please. TVA should utilize federal resources to quantitatively evaluate environmental justice in its IRP modeling. EPA and other federal agencies offer grants, technical assistance, and environmental justice mapping tools. The White House has also provided guidance through executive orders. For example, the Justice 40 initiative directs 40% of overall benefits of certain federal investments, including investments in clean energy and energy efficiency, to flow to disadvantaged communities. According to the Department of Energy, Justice 40 covered energy programs have been established within 23 federal agencies and offices, including 4 power marketing administrations. TVA is not listed among them. Next slide, please. DOE research also shows that energy burden, which refers to the percentage of household income spent on energy, is highest in southeastern states, and that low-income households face an energy burden 3 times higher than that in other households. The national average for all households is 4%. A 2020 literature review co-authored by former TVA board member Marilyn Brown found that energy burden was not declining and was especially high among minorities. Households have been defined as energy poor when spending more than 6% of their income on energy, based on the premise that a household should not spend more than 30% of its income on housing costs, according to federal guidelines, and utility bills should be no higher than 20% of those costs. Next slide, please. In 2022, Greenlink Analytics found that Black majority city of Memphis had some of the highest levels of energy burden in Tennessee and the nation, with a median of 8%, ranking it 4th among US cities. And energy burden was also highest in predominantly Black neighborhoods within Memphis. The highest energy burden was 27% of their household income. And 31% of Memphis households had energy burdens greater than 10%. Next slide, please. Utilizing the Greenlink Equity Map, I also recently found a moderate correlation across Tennessee counties between energy burden and the percentages of their populations who are Black. In addition, I found that Tennessee counties show a strong correlation between energy burden and asthma rates. Next slide, please. According to the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, the burden of asthma in the United States falls disproportionately on Black, Hispanic, and American Indian and Alaskan Native people. A 2018 study by the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, or ACEEE, concluded reducing annual electricity use by 15% nationwide would save more than 6 lives every day, prevent nearly 30,000 asthma episodes each year, and save Americans up to $20 billion through avoided health harms annually. Another 2018 study, co-authored by University of Tennessee professor Bruce Tunn, determined that the value of health benefits from the Federal Weatherization Assistance Program were even greater than the energy cost savings. In meetings I coordinated with TVA management about 8 years ago, we heard from community members across the Tennessee Valley about their experiences with unaffordable utility bills and inefficient housing that made it difficult to maintain healthy indoor temperatures and humidity levels. These struggles could quickly cascade. It's hard to sleep and be productive at work and school when freezing in the winter and sweltering in the summer. Some resorted to staying with relatives for parts of the year. Some had to ration medication and forgo adequate nutrition just to keep the lights on. They knew disconnections could lead to losing their homes. The Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development has recognized that energy burden could cause homelessness and found in a study of St. Paul, Minnesota, that 26% of evictions were due to utility cutoffs. Energy burden can be a life or death issue. Last week, TVA experienced a peak load event due to freezing temperatures, which left 14 people dead in Tennessee. Equitably addressing energy burden intersects with each of the core principles of environmental justice. Redressing historical and ongoing inequities is restorative justice. Fairly spreading utility costs and benefits is distributive justice. Equitable involvement in planning is procedural justice. Acknowledging the cruelty of energy poverty is recognition justice. Minimizing future energy burdens is intergenerational justice. One common objection to increasing low-income energy efficiency centers around utility concerns that higher-income ratepayers might be cross-subsidizing programs that they're not eligible to participate in. However, research has shown that the rate impacts of low-income programs on higher-income households are actually lower than the rate impacts endured by low-income ratepayers from efficiency programs they cannot afford to participate in due to upfront costs. This is inequitable. Next slide, please. TVA has a spotty record of starts and stops when it comes to energy efficiency. In its 2011 and 2015 IRPs, TVA planned for significant increases in energy efficiency and subsequently made notable progress in program implementation. This included successful low-income programs like Extreme Energy Makeovers, which helped thousands of ratepayers achieve energy savings averaging 36% at no cost to participants. However, TVA eliminated this program and most other offerings by 2018 and included only minimal levels of energy efficiency in its 2019 IRP. Next slide, please. As a result, TVA's energy savings have fallen behind the commission-regulated utilities in the Southeast, which trail behind national savings and have trailed behind national leaders themselves. I apologize. In its annual state energy efficiency scorecard, ACEEE has consistently ranked states served by TVA as some of the least efficient in the nation, especially in its utilities category, with Mississippi in a three-way tie for 46th place nationally. Mississippi has one of the highest poverty rates in the nation, at 18%. And Black people make up a higher percentage of the population there than in any other state. For Tennessee, ACEEE allotted only 1.5 points out of a possible rating of 15 points in its utilities category. Next slide, please. TVA recently took a step in a positive direction by announcing a $1.5 billion investment in demand-side management programs from 2024 through 2028, including energy efficiency, demand response, electric vehicles, and electrification. This is a big increase, but much more is needed to lift all ratepayers out of energy poverty. Greenlink found in 2022 that $1 to $1.5 billion was needed in Memphis alone. To fairly value energy efficiency in its 2024 IRP, TVA should research best practices of leading utilities, which have been highlighted in various reports by ACEEE. One important component of energy efficiency modeling is a creation of a TPOT study, which refers to technical, economic, and achievable potential. There's a lot of inherent uncertainty in potential studies, but also a lot of room for unreasonable assumptions that deflate the results. For example, some consider only a limited set of program designs, exclude non-energy benefits, omit certain cost-effectiveness tests, or apply excessive discounts based on economic factors like free ridership and leakage. Despite offering to sign a non-disclosure agreement, I have not been able to obtain a copy of TVA's recent potential study. Next slide, please. Investing in clean energy also creates a lot of jobs. Last year, E2 reported that there are already more than 80,000 clean energy jobs in Tennessee, including about 50,000 in energy efficiency, 16,000 in clean vehicles, 8,000 in storage and grid work, and 6,500 in renewable energy. Next slide, please. Utilizing Greenlink's Clean Energy Jobs Calculator, I have estimated that TVA's $1.5 billion demand-side investment could lead to a net impact of about 10,000 additional local jobs. This estimate is based solely on TVA's spending on program costs, does not include the effects of additional ratepayer investments or the economic benefits of avoided power plant capacity and generation needs, reduced energy bills, health benefits, or other non-energy benefits. These jobs are mostly in manufacturing and construction and are expected to pay between $39,000 and $58,000 per year, which is about 35 to 100% higher than the $29,000 median annual income in Tennessee. TVA's investment could cause an estimated net increase in job-based income of about $660 million. Putting more money into the pockets of low and moderate income families also has a high multiplier effect on economic growth since they have a higher propensity to spend that money locally. Next slide, please. In conclusion, I offer the following recommendations to TVA regarding the issues I just discussed. 1, allow formal interveners in the IRP process with standard rights afforded in state commission proceedings, including data discovery and cross-examination. 2, partner with environmental justice organizations to conduct regular listening tours in low-income communities across the Tennessee Valley to learn about experiences with high energy burden and gather input on resource planning. 3, model pathways to achieve the Whitehouse goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2035. 4, improve representation for environmental justice communities on the Regional Energy Resource Council and the IRP Working Group. 5, calculate environmental justice costs and benefits to utilize as data inputs in resource modeling, including costs of inequitable distribution of health and economic impacts. 6, fully utilize federal grants, technical assistance, and other resources to maximize equitable investments in cost-effective renewable energy and energy efficiency. 7, prioritize low-income energy efficiency in the deployment of the recently announced $1.5 billion investment in demand-side management. 8, include low-income carve-outs in energy efficiency and distributed energy programs and target program deployment to remediate racial inequities. 9, consult with stakeholders to incorporate best practices in energy efficiency potential studies, including the valuing of non-energy benefits and consideration of societal cost tests. And finally, number 10, provide support for the workforce development needed to advance an equitable clean energy transition, including job training and guidelines for diverse hiring, fair compensation, safety standards, and other essential workers' rights. To uphold its mission and fulfill the goals of its Equity Action Plan, TVA must improve stakeholder engagement. If TVA includes more voices, it will benefit both TVA and the diverse communities of the Tennessee Valley. TVA will gain valuable insights and improve community relations. Communities will gain greater opportunities for relief from energy burden and environmental injustices, which they understand better than anyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Does that conclude your testimony?
Yes, at this time.
Mr. Chairman, the witness is available for questions.
Thanks, sir. And you referenced some employment benefits. Those are recurring, correct?
Hopefully they're recurring. So that would depend potentially on future investments by TVA and demand-side management, which I hope to see coming out of the resource decisions made in the 2024 IRP. The job numbers and estimated net income impacts represent the net present value for TVA's total $1.5 billion investment over the 5-year period from 2024 to 2028.
Thank you. How should environmental justice inform utility resource planning?
That's a good question. So I think that it really needs to be an increasing issue across the board, but especially before TVA as a federal agency whose mission really lines up well from its beginning with these issues of environmental stewardship, economic development, and also providing low-cost power. And I think low cost should, consider usage and not simply rates. Right now, for TVA and some other utilities as well, most environmental justice impacts could be considered economic externalities in the sense that they're not presently quantitatively evaluated in determining the cost of service. However, there are certain other externalities, particularly air pollution and certain other environmental impacts, which state utility commissions do already provide guidelines for utilities to incorporate into their IRP modeling, either qualitatively or quantitatively. And I think that that sort of principle should also apply to other impacts, including health impacts and certainly energy burden.
A number of witnesses have mentioned the IRA. Do you see evidence in TVA's plan that they're systematically trying to take advantage of the IRA savings for different generation resources?
I have not so far. Unfortunately, I have not been privy to the deliberations that TVA has conducted behind closed doors. To the extent that they've shared any details publicly, which I've gone through pretty carefully on their IRP website, it does not seem that they're doing that at this time.
Do you know if there's been outreach in terms of the energy efficiency aspects of IRA so that folks know that there are benefits out there?
Again, it does not appear so, and you would expect that to be quite visible inherently. So I can say pretty confidently that TVA is not doing that, but they should.
Thanks, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
You may be
Mr. Chairman, because our final witness is virtual, remote, we're going to need a few minutes to kind of restructure a few things for that.
Okay. Well, do we want to take 10? Hit the snacks in the loo, as the Navy people say. Does 5 work better? Okay, we can take 5. Folks want to grab a snack.
Yep, sure. Be back in 5 minutes. So how is it? So they're wanting the laptop.
So yes, I think they want to stand over here, and then Ted's going to stand, or sit and then stand up for questions. Okay. After this.
Yes. That's fine. Okay, yeah, whatever you do. Yeah.
Is the mic, isn't there going to be an echo? No, it's just like.
So if we spoke of Pearson, got it. So you just tell us what we do. We'll just do it.
Honestly, should we put Ted right here? Yes. We'll just change. I'm going to change the name on this to Ted Thomas.
Yes. So, yeah. Taylor, can you hear us now? Can you come off mute? I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yes. Sounds good. Thank you. I'll actually turn the video on here too, yeah? No. So he can see. Taylor?
We just gotta make.
I think I still have access. There you go.
Should we do this unmuted the whole time?
Okay. So, yeah.
So we'll just leave.
We'll have to go like. Yeah. You want to try talking, Taylor? Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Sounds good. Yeah, that's what I think. Somewhere there should be okay. Yes. And quick question for you all in the room.
Yes.
Is it okay if I read my slides like this? Just because I have my remarks on my other screen and I'm not sure how to
Yeah.
make both those things happen.
Yeah, I think that's fine. It's like sort of a small view, but I think that's totally okay. Oh wait, we can adjust the view actually. Perfect. Yep. We got it. Yeah, this is perfect. Yep. Okay, and if you need to make any edits right now, Taylor, just know that the whole room can see you, but that's okay. No big deal. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, we're still on a short break and we'll come back here in a couple minutes.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, it should be good. We're just about to get started, Taylor.
Okay, if I can ask everybody to take their seats again, we'll get back started. I do have one announcement to make as well. The organizers would like to take a photo at the end of today, or the end of the afternoon session. So anybody that can stick around after the hearing adjourns, we will take a group photo. We appreciate that. Are we still on the record? I believe we're going back on the record for the hearing part now, and so the next party can be called.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. My name is Gabriela Seri Tovar, and I represent the Center for Biological Diversity. I'd like to call Taylor McNair to testify. Please state your name for the record.
Taylor McNair.
And by whom are you employed?
Buildout.
Have you testified in other IRP proceedings before?
No, this is my first.
Do you have any materials or exhibits to accompany your testimony today? And have those been provided in advance?
Yes, they have.
And have you prepared a summary of your analysis for today?
I have, yes.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, may the witness summarize his testimony?
Yes, you may. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, my name is Taylor McNair. I'm the program manager at Buildout. We are a national nonprofit that provides technical assistance to policymakers, regulators, and clean energy advocates on the clean energy transition. So we heard today already why integrated resource planning is important. It presents an opportunity for utilities and stakeholders to understand the energy needs of the community, to develop a set of metrics and inputs to achieve those goals, and then help prepare near and long-term risks and challenges. Planning process, it should be transparent, as we heard. It should accurately represent the actual cost to ratepayers, the system impacts, the value of all the resources being considered, and the plan should evaluate opportunities to meet goals relevant to not just the utilities themselves, but also to the stakeholders and the regulators and the ratepayers that the utility serves. Goals including reliability and affordability, but also equity goals, environmental goals, carbon goals, etc. And in pursuit of these goals, which is what I'd like to spend the majority of my time talking about today, Buildout, working with the Center for Biological Diversity, engaged a leading energy consulting firm, Synapse Energy Economics, to evaluate the TVA planning process and help us understand if TVA's current proposals are aligned with the needs of the valley. So this analysis that I plan to present today, the 100% Clean Energy Future for TVA, it's a guide to help us inform the 2024 TVA IRP process and demonstrate how the utility can accelerate fossil fuel retirements and enhance renewable resource procurements, while also reducing costs for ratepayers and delivering economic and environmental benefits for the valley and its residents. So our guiding question in conducting this analysis was really simple. Is TVA prepared to meet national clean energy goals while continuing to deliver benefits to its customers in the valley? So what do we do here? Synapse, in consultation with community stakeholders and environmental groups, including many of the organizations represented today, conducted an analysis of TVA's resource generation mix using what's known as electric sector capacity expansion and production cost modeling. So Synapse used the Encompass modeling tool, which is the same tool that TVA is using right now to perform its own 2024 IRP. And in conducting the analysis, Synapse developed two core scenarios to help us compare to what TVA is doing. So the first of which is a TVA baseline scenario, which models, basically a status quo approach utilizing the 2019 IRP as a benchmark, and then relying on updated assumptions to reflect, today's cost of generating resources, including the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act and sort of other recent developments. And then to contrast against that, we also evaluated what we call the 100% clean energy scenario. So this requires TVA to achieve 100% clean energy by 2035, while also increasing the demand side electrification of our buildings and our industry and our transportation sectors. We also look at a third scenario, sort of a sensitivity on that clean energy scenario, known as the ambitious DER scenario, which looks at a greater expansion of those demand side resources that we've already heard some folks talk about today. Things like rooftop solar, battery storage, and flexible load. So those clean energy scenarios, they actually enforce a constraint into the model. And what it does is it requires TVA to reduce electric sector emissions by 80% by 2030 and then 100% by 2035 relative to 2005 levels. Whereas the TVA baseline scenario is status quo, as I mentioned, so there's no emissions constraint. And then beyond those constraints, we attempt to make the scenarios as identical as possible in order to offer a really clear point of comparison between the baseline and the clean energy scenarios. We tweak a few features across scenarios such as energy efficiency measures, electrification, distributed energy resources, and things like that, which I'm happy to speak about in more detail. But by and large, we try to mimic these scenarios to give us a clear point of comparison. And then utilizing these assumptions, Synapse ran the capacity expansion and production cost models to evaluate how the resource mix changes over time. And then in addition to that, Synapse also performs additional analysis on the related impacts to that changing energy mix, including the jobs and economic impact, the rates and bills and energy burden impacts, and then the impacts to things like public health, water, and land use in the valley, to give us many points of comparison for how we can evaluate this IRP proposal. So in summary, we found that a 100% clean energy transition for TVA would deliver over $255 billion in economy-wide net savings for valley customers by 2050. And the transition would support over 15,000 full-time job equivalent jobs each year and deliver over $27 billion in public health benefits relative to the baseline scenario. At the same time, TVA would reduce electric sector carbon emissions down to zero, while also reducing the energy burden that TVA ratepayers pay towards energy use. So our modeling really follows the basic IRP structure. If you were a utility, you would more or less be conducting a similar exercise as the one that we conducted here. And it begins with a bottoms-up load forecast in order to evaluate how demand for electricity is going to change over the study period. So in 2020, as you can see on the screen, electricity demand for the TVA region is about 164 terawatt hours. And in the TVA baseline scenario, we find that electricity demand remains moderately the same throughout the study period. There's very little rise over the next 30 years. But in contrast, in our clean energy scenarios, we actually see electricity demand rise a little bit in the next few years, and then grows rapidly, resulting in a doubling of electricity demand by 2050. So So in that year 2050, in the 100% clean energy scenario, electricity demand is actually 406 terawatt hours compared to today's value of 164. And that's really a result of the aggressive demand side electrification, economy-wide electrification that we see in analysis. So the next step is really, what is it going to take for TVA to meet this demand? And what we find is that as electricity demand rises throughout the study period, we find solar, wind, and battery storage ramp up considerably to meet the rising energy needs. So in the 100% clean energy scenario, this means that almost 80% of 2050 generation is coming from renewable resources, and the remaining is comprised of existing nuclear power and hydropower resources already on the system. These clean resources come along earlier in the 100% clean scenario relative to the baseline scenario, largely because the fossil fuel plants retire earlier to meet the emissions constraint, so the renewable resources ramp up a little quicker. Interestingly enough, though, even without the imposed emissions constraint in the baseline scenario, that baseline is still impacted by the natural economic forces that we see play out, which has the effect of accelerating the retirement of some fossil fuel plants and increasing clean energy as it appears to be the lowest cost resource for the model to select. So by 2050, the TVA baseline scenario is still adding a pretty substantial 34 gigawatts of solar, 3 gigawatts of distributed solar, so rooftop solar, 13 gigawatts of wind, and 9 gigawatts of battery storage. But we contrast this to the 100% clean energy scenario, which is detailed in the figure on the screen. And that scenario really sees a dramatic acceleration of clean energy resources relative to the baseline. So in this scenario, we assume that only 5 gigawatts of each renewable resource can be built per year, so that sort of reflects existing supply chain constraints, and perhaps that's a conservative assumption at some point. We hope to see that increase, but in many years, the model actually builds to this limit, so it suggests that the cap is binding, and the system needs the sort of maximum amount of clean energy that it can bring onto the system. And what this scenario requires is about an annual addition of a little over 3 gigawatts of solar per year, 1.5 gigawatts of wind, and 1.7 gigawatts of battery storage. And when we add those all up over the course of the entire study period, so looking out to 2050, the renewable additions are staggering, well beyond what TVA is considering in its own planning processes, well beyond what we've seen in the baseline scenario that we evaluated. And those totals equate to about 41 gigawatts of new wind, 46 gigawatts of new battery storage, and over 100 gigawatts of new solar energy by 2050. A quick note, something that an element that folks have discussed today, and we might discuss some more, is that the Valley region is actually a little constrained in the quality and quantity of new wind resources. And we try to account for this in the model by giving the model the option to build new transmission lines to neighboring regions to help bring in more cost-effective resources that can be found outside the valley. And despite the added cost for new transmission, so the model also has to consider the cost of these resources, and that amounts to about $45 billion by 2050. The model actually selects about 94% of its new wind resources out of the region. So this kind of helps articulate just the value of a broader market and TVA leaning on its neighbors to bring in new cost-effective resources. So after building out that clean energy portfolio, we also wanted to test the reliability to ensure that it can meet demand at all hours of the year. The model portfolios that we evaluated meet the binding reserve margin constraint, so that's a requirement for TVA to meet a certain amount of load plus an extra buffer margin on top of that at all times. And while the model does experience a few hours of what we call loss of load events, so periods where there is unserved energy, we go back and compensate for this by adding an additional battery storage to cover those unserved events and then accounting for the costs and and considerations related to that. So of course, the next logical question to this analysis is, well, what is this going to cost? So we synapse models the economic impact of this transition, including not just the costs on the electric sector, but also the impact of increasing electrification in the buildings and transportation and industrial sectors. And what we find is that the cost for both scenarios, so for the baseline scenario and the 100% clean scenario, are largely similar, about $5 billion per year to the 2030s. However, as the 100% clean energy scenario really ramps up in building the resources, the costs rise to have those resources and to build out the grid to support those resources. And those costs in the 100% clean scenario rise to about $9 billion per year. Whereas in the baseline scenario, costs remain largely flat because there's very little demand for that system. But when we take that number and we look at it on a dollar per megawatt hour basis, the costs for this clean energy scenario are actually similar or even cheaper in some cases than the baseline. And that's largely a effect of the increased electricity demand. So as we increase investments on the grid, but we spread those investments over a larger number of megawatt hours, we see that the cost per megawatt hour is similar around, or even cheaper than today, around $25 to $30 per megawatt hour. So while these electric system investments are substantial, we actually find that when we look at the economy as a whole, so not just the electric sector, these costs are really offset by savings that customers will see in other sectors. So as detailed on the screen, we've broken out the costs for not just building the wind and the solar and the transmission lines, but also for transitioning our buildings to electric heating and cooling and transitioning our vehicles to electric vehicles. We find that as a result of this transition to electric vehicles and electric home appliances, spending on fossil fuels falls dramatically, falls to near zero. And as a result, the non-electric fuel savings add up to about $240 billion in cumulative savings. That's about 7 times greater than the cost of just building up the electric sector to meet all this increased demand. So when we take all of these factors into account, it really articulates the importance of economy-wide action to address potential cost issues and address the carbon challenge more broadly. And while we recognize here that TVA is not in a position to force its customers to purchase electric vehicles or to swap its appliances, it is in a position to support that transition. And a strong focus in its IRP on electrification and grid integration and customer and demand-side flexibility can help enable this transition and ensure that customers see cost savings. So there's also implications for how these total system costs are allocated down to the ratepayer level. So we take these total system costs and we allocate them down on a dollar per kilowatt hour basis based on the customer type. And we find that electricity rates in the 100% clean energy scenario are largely stagnant or maybe even decrease over time. But bills would actually rise potentially as a result of purchasing more electricity because more appliances will use electricity and things like that. But again, this is just one part of the equation. So when we look on a broader economy-wide consideration, understanding that consumers are not just paying an electric bill, right? They're paying for gas to fuel their cars or heat their homes. We find that the energy burden in the community, we heard the other Taylor speak about this just earlier, actually falls to about 3% from 7% today. So that means consumers in the valley are keeping more money in their pockets instead of spending it on electricity and fossil fuels, and it enables them to spend more freely on other things in the economy. And this is really relevant to our next point of analysis, which is the economic activity. And we find that as a result of this build out of wind and solar and transmission and this transition to electrified appliances and vehicles, the valley stands to add over 15,000 full-time jobs each year through 2050. So there's some nuance within those numbers, which we can talk about more. but it really represents just the economic opportunity that's embedded in this clean energy transition. We also wanted to take a look at the public health impacts. This is a consideration that is largely absent from IRPs in our experience, but is really critical. Considering that TVA's generation fleet is, arguably somewhere around the 6th largest in the country, it's important that they're evaluating how the resources are contributing to health impacts. Again, we heard Taylor speak about this a little bit in previous testimony. But what we find as a result of this transition to cleaner vehicles and cleaner generation, the clean energy scenario actually amounts to nearly $27 billion in public health benefits relative to that baseline. So coming to the end here, I also wanted to talk about one sensitivity that we honed in on in order to understand how TVA might benefit from increased deployment of distributed energy resources. So we evaluate a scenario in which TVA is required to procure additional rooftop solar and battery storage. And what we find is that the inclusion of those customer-cited resources actually helps replace large-scale utility projects that would otherwise need to be built in a 100% clean energy scenario. And this has an effect of reducing costs for ratepayers. So we find that this addition of increased flexible demand-side resources, so things like rooftop solar and battery storage, but also smart appliances and smart vehicle charging, it has the effect of reducing the investments that TVA needs to make on the wholesale side, and it ends up saving consumers about $1.5 billion in 2050 relative to that clean energy scenario. So just in summary, we found that this 100% clean energy transition would deliver over $255 billion in economy-wide net savings, supporting over 15,000 jobs each year and over $27 billion in public health benefits. At the same time, reducing the energy burden on TVA ratepayers and reducing carbon emissions dramatically. And while we understand that this analysis here was developed prior to the 2024 IRP, it offers a really nice potential roadmap for TVA to serve as a model for decarbonization for the rest of the nation. What we currently know about the 2024 IRP, it does not suggest that the utility plans on evaluating 100% clean energy scenarios or accelerated fossil fuel retirements beyond those already announced. So we recommend that TVA's 2024 IRP include explicit carbon reduction scenarios, including this pathway to 100% clean energy. And that TVA should also evaluate opportunities to increase customer adoption of demand-side resources like flexible load or rooftop storage or rooftop solar. And that the IRP should include robust consideration of the anticipated effects of increased electrification. So ensuring that the utility is appropriately preparing for this influx of new electrified appliances, electric vehicles, electric industrial processes, et cetera, in order to be prepared to meet load. And our analysis suggests that an ambitious clean energy pathway can save consumers money, provide economic and human health benefits to the region, and allow TVA to serve as a national model for power sector decarbonization. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my testimony. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, sir, for your time and presentation. Now, there's an industry standard for reliability that's used pretty much everywhere, correct?
That's right, yeah.
And your model meets that. The proposal that you're making meets that standard definition of reliability, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, every utility does it a little differently, but what we did is, in our analysis, we actually modeled TVA's required reliability constraints as they presented it in their 2019 IRP. So they represented as a planning reserve margin, as I mentioned before. And when we run our analysis, we impose the same constraints such that the model has to meet that planning reserve margin in every period of the year that we evaluate. And what we find is that our clean energy scenario meets that planning reserve margin at all hours of the year during each season. sort of honing to the same constraints that TVA relies on to plan its own system.
Okay, thank you. Should generation and transmission be evaluated together at the same time, in your view?
Yeah, another great question, and again, an often overlooked component of most IRPs, but definitely an overlooked component of the TVA IRP, but also a shortfall we see in a number of resource planning proposals across the country. It's really important that transmission is viewed as an optimal and candidate resource in conjunction with generation, because those implications for bringing in new power from neighboring regions have pretty, could have dramatic effects on how the utility ends up meeting electricity demand, particularly in times of emergency, whether that's during winter storms or other peak events. So we sort of tried to evaluate this in our analysis by giving the model an option to build that transmission at the same time as it was building generation resources. And we find that the model does take advantage. So the model leans on neighboring regions, in particular Midwestern wind, because it's a extremely cost-effective and high capacity factor resource. And it leans on those resources to meet load, particularly in times of need, during winter peaks or periods of high demand.
So in essence, you're paying for the transmission by the money that you save on the generation side.
Exactly. So we account for the cost of that new transmission, but what we find is that new transmission actually helps avoid other investments in perhaps more expensive peaker plants or things like that would otherwise have to be built without the additional transmission investment.
Does TVA make any information available to the public with respect to transmission planning within its footprint that you're aware of?
We haven't seen a lot. We know that TVA participates in sort of the broader regional transmission planning processes, which are in and of themselves a bit opaque and hard to digest. But beyond what's shared publicly, which is just a handful of ad hoc announcements on new transmission investments, we don't get a lot of detail into the technical analysis behind their transmission analysis and sort of any of the technical specifications of what they plan to build or how they plan to build out their grid.
And with respect to interregional transmission planning, is it the same as you described for regional?
Yeah, that's largely the same. We don't have the benefit of TVA belonging to a broader transmission organization, a broader RTO or wholesale market, so we don't get that kind of insight. That's largely true for a lot of TVA and its neighbors in the region. So yeah, a relatively opaque process that we would love to see emerge in the IRP process, but we haven't seen a lot of that information publicly.
And you kind of walked into my last question. Do you see benefits for TVA in terms of joining a regional market?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just in our really limited view of the benefits of transmission in our own analysis, we find that it can avoid significant overinvestment in new capacity on the system. And that's largely because TVA, by relying on its neighbors, can help avoid some of those demand issues. We saw that during, for example, Winter Storm Elliott and even Winter Storm Heather most recently to some effect. We saw TVA leaning on its neighbors with what limited transmission interconnection it does have to bring in much needed power. So we would assume that TVA belonging to a broader geographical footprint with access to lower cost resources in different regions that are experiencing different weather phenomenon would bring large benefits to the region and large benefit to value ratepayers.
That works the other way too. If somebody else is having a crisis, surplus energy from TVA could be sold to them with the benefit flowing back to ratepayers. Right.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've seen that in recent winter storm events.
That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
TVA was invited to participate here today. So if anybody is here, I don't think I know anybody's here, but if somebody's here from TVA that wishes to address the group, now is your opportunity to do so. Okay. In a normal process, what would happen next is we would adhere to a procedural schedule that would lay out timeframes for what each person was supposed to do. We obviously don't have that formality here, but I do know that folks who presented are working on a transcript and to make this stuff available. It's also available on YouTube. And what you can do, the TVA board makes these decisions. So if you want a direct communication about your concerns about what's going on, that would be a great place to start. Membership of the TVA board. That
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is JT Neal. I'm with. Hello. Okay. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and take it out if that's okay. I think that would be a little easier. Hi, everybody. My name is JT Neal. I'm I'm with Sunrise Movement Nashville, and I have been given the privilege of wrapping us up or wrapping up our afternoon session for today. So first off, let's offer a round of applause for Chairman Thomas here, our first moderator. And then if we could get a round of applause for our AV people, Stephen and Desiree. They're up there. They've been getting us back on track when we get off and reminding us to stick our mouths on the microphone. We also want to thank each one of our experts for the analysis that they performed and the testimony that they provided today. And also another thank you to Congressman Cohen for his video remarks that we used at the beginning of the session. As we wrap up this afternoon, we would like to remind everyone of two things. Thing number one, we have the opportunity to reconvene at 6 p.m. for a public dialogue session that will include opening remarks by Tennessee State Representative Justin J. Pearson in person and additional recorded video from another federal legislator. And the second thing is we are going to take just a quick little group photo of everybody, and that'll be all. That will conclude us for this afternoon. So thank you so much. Yeah, Gabby, do you want to take it?
Yeah, great question. So it's going to be a community discussion, so it's set up differently than most TVA public listening sessions. So it's very discussion based, and we'll have different tables, breakout groups for folks to engage with everyone else showing up in the evening to talk about lots of different topics like the gas build out, utility bill affordability, economics and job growth. Yeah.
Welcome, everyone, to today's community discussion as part of the People's Voice on TVA's Energy Plan. I am Paul Klein with the Climate Reality Project's Tennessee State Coalition. I'm one of the co-hosts for today's People's Hearing, along with Appalachian Voices, Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Sunrise Nashville, Energy Alabama, Center for Biological Diversity, and Vote Solar. We're here today because TVA is moving forward with planning the future of energy in the Valley, and they haven't been transparent about it. They have the power to hold a public hearing, and yet they haven't. So we're holding our own instead. You might notice that this community discussion is set up differently than TVA's listening sessions, and that's on purpose. We, and I'm sure many of you feel the same, believe that TVA's process for public participation is insufficient and it doesn't lead to much action from their board, staff, or anyone else at TVA. Instead, we hope to model a more engaging and empowering community discussion where you will feel heard, get to meet people from across the region, and generate ideas in a collective manner that we can urge TVA to take up. We're so glad to be here with you today, and we're looking forward to discussing your ideas for the energy future that we all want TVA to build. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Tennessee State Representative Justin J. Pearson. Representative. Yeah. Representative Pearson became the second youngest lawmaker serving in the Tennessee House of Representatives when he was elected to office 1 year ago yesterday at the age of 28. He is a community organizer and servant leader who prioritizes the needs of the people. He co-founded the organization Memphis Community Against Pollution, MCAP, and in the House. And he led the fight to stop the multi-billion-dollar Byhalia pipeline from running through Memphis. Representative Pearson's advocacy and leadership inspired the Sierra Club to recognize him as the 2023 National Changemaker of the Year and the Root to declare him as one of the 100 most influential Black Americans in 2022. Please help me welcome State Representative Justin J. Pearson.
Please take your seats. Thank you so much, Uncle Paul, for your very kind introduction. Thank you to everyone who is here and everyone who has joined online. I am really thankful to be here. I'm thankful to be here as a state representative again. I know a lot of you marched, sent emails, and showed up for that to happen. But also I'm thankful to be here as a fellow angelic dissenter to a status quo that is unjust, to a status quo that too often hurts and harms us. There are so many friends here. Amanda, hello. I've had so many friends here. If you were in or with us in the Byhalia pipeline fight, just wave your hand. Yep. Offered a piece of advice, read an article, shared an article, wrote the talking points. In whatever ways you were engaged, thank you. It showed us how we build, how we sustain a movement for justice rooted in love. To my MCAP family, Keyshawn, my oldest brother, to Kimberly, to Yolanda, who are continuing the mission of Memphis Community Against Pollution by knocking on doors and making phone calls and building volunteer lists and being a part of just an extraordinary coalition of people who are here and who are joining online. Thank you. I was given 5 to 8 minutes. I have never kept with the time limit in my life. But tonight I am going to try. This is what people power looks like. This is what people power looks like. Somebody say people power. Somebody else say people power. If you're online, type in the chat, people power. Elizabeth said it anyway. I love it. People power. People power exists where the people who've been cut off, the people who've been oppressed, the people who've been silenced refuse to accept those positions. And instead they take up the position of justice. They demand that their voices be heard. You know, when folks like TVA refuse to have public hearings, and then some folks get together and say, we'll have our own. This is what people power looks like. It demands more. It demands better from those who are in position positions of power to actually do something with the titles that they have and the positions that they have. People power meets the status quo and says, I know you can be better, and demands for it to change. This is people power. This is people power. And it is needed for such a time as this. Tennessee Valley Authority is a bad corporation. They'd say they're a public something or other. They're just a corporation. I'm a public employee. I do not make $10 million a year. Okay, that's not how that works. The Tennessee Valley Authority has a history. Somebody say a history. We're in a church, and I'm black, and I preach. So all of my white friends, y'all about to get a black church experience for the next 4 minutes and 30 seconds that I have on the clock. Okay, TVA has a history. Somebody say a history. If you're online, type in a history. They have a history in Southwest Memphis, part of the district that I represent. TVA has had toxic coal ash building on top of our aquifer for decades. They were forced, and you know, Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation rarely does anything that we need them to do willingly. But they forced TVA to clean up its toxic coal ash because you had POA and SCLC and a whole lot of other folks saying there's some change that's got to happen because y'all have got a history of disinvesting in communities of color that have historically had pollution. So they were forced to remove the toxic coal ash that had been built up, but then they created a plan that ran the toxic coal ash through lower income black communities. That was their solution. It's like the very same communities that we polluted for 70 years, the very same communities that we helped to contribute the increase in cancer, is the very same communities that we are going to burden with us getting the fill to fill up the landfill. The dirt is going to come out of Boxtown, the community we polluted the air of, and then we're going to truck it through those same black communities. TVA has a history. You know, Duke University did a study in Bull Run. You know about this, where they built a playground and TVA had to come out and say, yes, we used coal ash for the playground that children played on. But see, that didn't become public until a university did a study of it, because TVA's got this history of silence. They've got this history of not caring and needing to be called out in order for us to recognize and for them to recognize that we will not be silent anymore. Today I learned more about a project in our district, District 86. Again, I got Southwest Memphis all the way up to Millington. There's a solar panel project coming. Y'all know we love solar panels. We all about clean energy. I need solar panels. I need wind energy. I need water energy. I need every energy outside of fossil fuels that we can find. But there's something interesting that happened as I was talking to these folks. I got changed. Not from my position that we need to have cleaner energy that we needed. You all know, you experienced the climate disaster of this weather that we had, where over 8 people in Shelby County were killed due to weather-related incidences. Like, we know the consequences of climate change, but when I talked to them, I learned that TVA was mistreating them. Many of the problems that we faced against the Byhalia pipeline, I learned TVA was doing as well. So what were those things, Representative? They went into the community with lawyers, and they told the community that these solar panels are coming no matter what you're going to do, and you don't deserve to have a voice. They asked for them to say something about the environmental impact. What about the erosion of this farmland? What consequences will they have on their water? They were ignored. And so while I'm a big supporter, obviously, of clean energy, there's always a way that we must force people to do things when they don't care about the communities that they are in. It is not Machiavellian attitude is wrong. The ends justify the means. That is wrong. That is actually immoral, because means matter. How we get to where we are going matters. And for people of good conscience and people of justice who are holding these institutions to the promises that they're supposed to be fulfilling, we have to ensure that the means remain just for everybody. I got 2 more minutes left, and then I'm sitting down. TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, does not care about our communities. They forced many municipalities into never-ending contracts. Particularly, smaller counties were forced to sign a deal with TVA that in essence locks them into that deal in perpetuity. We just barely in Memphis were able to fight with all we had to prevent the Memphis Light, Gas, and Water Board, thanks again to our amazing attorneys and friends at Southern Environmental Law Center, to prevent Memphis Light Gas and Water from signing a never-ending contract. But you know, part of the thing that the former, that the CEO of Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, said, he's like, well, we got all these other municipalities to do it, force them to. Believing these other cities, these other counties, that they had no other option, they had no other opportunity. The Tennessee Valley Authority has a history. The largest gas build-out in our country of any utility is being planned by the Tennessee Valley Authority. Pipelines after pipelines after pipelines after expansion of fossil fuels, creating the problem of climate change and then telling us it's a bridge fuel. This is what's going to get us out of the climate crisis. More fossil fuel extraction. So what is it? What is it for us now? There's the amazing, the TVA, Clean Up TVA Coalition. Love the name, Clean Up TVA Coalition, because it isn't just a coalition of good-hearted and good-willing and amazing, extraordinary people and organizations. It's a call to action. And at this time and at this moment, we must act, because the time is now. The time is now for us. It is not 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. The time is now for justice. The time is now for us to plan for a cleaner, healthier, and safer future. The time is now for all of us, from West Tennessee to Middle Tennessee to Eastern Tennessee, to organize and mobilize and activate, because what is happening to one of us affects all of us. The time is now for us to see the interlocking injustices of environmental and climate degradation and the perpetuation of greed and the disrespect of our communities as a problem that we must all work to solve. The time is to clean up the Tennessee Valley Authority. The time is to build a future filled with a just transition that meets the present needs and the future needs in order that we might leave a habitable planet for future generations. The time is now to resist. The time is to fight back. The time is to organize. The time is to mobilize. The time is to activate our people power, to change the course of Tennessee and American history. The time is, we must not bend, we must not bow, we must not break. We must give all that we've got to this movement for justice, rooted in love, because our present and our future, and those who will come well, even after them, will look and say, what did we do now? What did we give now? What did we sacrifice now? How did we fight now to ensure a better world where everybody got clean air and clean soil and clean water? And the time is to stand up. The time is now. Let us move and let us fight with all we've got, because the time is. God bless you, and thank you for having me.
Okay, can you hear me? All right, who's fired up? That was like such a powerful message to start this community discussion. So another round of applause. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Gabby Saritovar. I'm with the Center for Biological Diversity. And next up we have a message from U.S. Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts, who has been a tremendous advocate in Congress, holding TVA accountable and pushing them to lead the way on clean energy and tackling the climate crisis. He has shared a brief video for us today, so we'll get that playing.
Hello, everyone. I'm Senator Ed Markey. Thank you for the opportunity to join the people's hearing today. I'm grateful for all of you in the Tennessee Valley region fighting for a more affordable, reliable, fair, clean energy future. As climate-fueled disasters ravage our communities, we know we need to be running towards a clean energy future. But instead of matching the Biden administration's 2030 zero carbon target for the entire country's electricity grid, TVA has been slow walking. TVA only aspires to be net zero by 2050. That's 20 years later than the Biden goal, and only 3% of TVA's energy portfolio is currently comprised of wind and solar. By comparison, in Massachusetts, not the sunniest place out there, 22% of in-state generation comes from wind and solar. Even when TVA has the option to replace retiring coal plants, it has chosen to replace them with expensive and unreliable fossil gas and energy. So, in fact, TVA has planned the largest fossil fuel build-out of any utility in the nation this decade, and this dirty energy has not kept prices lower. Customers already pay some of the highest electricity bills in the nation as a percentage of income. That's an embarrassment for the TVA, a bad deal for its customers, and terrible cost for our climate. TVA has an opportunity to change course this year with its integrated resource plan, which will shape the future of energy in the Tennessee Valley through 2050. To do so, TVA desperately needs a more open, accountable, visionary, transparent planning process. In other words, a climate-focused process. TVA customers deserve to have cheap, clean megawatts on the grid and their financial wealth and their physical health. As our largest public utility, TVA can and should be with the rest of the nation now leading so they can chart a future for a more just, more clean, more renewable future. They should be leading at TVA and not holding our country back. It's time to see the real leadership that TVA has to provide for our country.
All right, and we've got one more video for you from U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, who has also been another great advocate in Congress, pushing TVA to focus on resilience, to protect our energy system from extreme weather like Winter Storm Elliott. And he has shared a video.
Hello, everyone. It's Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island. Thank you for inviting me to speak at the People's Hearing on the TVA's Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP. I'm very pleased to join all of you today. An IRP is a foundational document. It charts TVA's course for how to meet the region's anticipated future electricity demand. The 2019 IRP proposed to add more than 18,000 megawatts of gas, the equivalent of half of the TVA's resource mix by 2038. That is not a direction the region and our nation can afford to take, and TVA can correct course through its next IRP. President Biden set a goal to decarbonize our electricity system by 2035. As our nation's largest public power provider, TVA should step up and lead other utilities in charting the clean energy path forward. The IRP also presents an opportunity to look at how to fortify the region's grid to withstand extreme weather events fueled by climate change. TVA customers should not have to suffer rolling blackouts from losing 20% of power to extreme weather events, as they did during Winter Storm Elliott in late 2022. Climate change is here now, and grid owners and operators must plan and prepare for it. Otherwise, customers will likely face fees and fines and outages that could otherwise be avoided. I join all of you here today in calling on TVA to lead from the front and to show the Tennessee Valley as well as our nation what a clean energy future looks like. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, we are so grateful to Senators Markey and Whitehouse for providing such powerful remarks and important visions for TVA. And again, a huge thank you to State Representative Justin Pearson for joining us today. With that, earlier today, we hosted a hearing with expert witnesses that was engaging and informative. For those who couldn't make it this afternoon, I'll turn it over to Jake Duncan from Vote Solar to recap that session.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming out. I love following 3 different elected officials with some dry information about a hearing. But I'm just going to take just a few minutes just to recap what we talked about earlier today. So like Gabby mentioned, and we've talked about, we're emulating what we want to see the TVA to do. And so in basically every other state, there's a state agency that gets to review what is in a utility's resource plan. They allow people to intervene in what is essentially a court case, provide data sharing. Folks can submit their own modeling and put forward expert witnesses that provide testimony that this agency then uses in their decision making around what to do with the resource plan. That doesn't happen in TVA's territory at all. So we hosted our own expert witness hearing earlier today. We had 4 experts show up, and I'm just going to quickly go over what they talked about. So first we had Liz Stanton with Applied Economics Clinic. She focused a lot on the IRP process itself, some of the things I just noted about how TVA holds out their solicits public input, whether or not they share data, things like that. She noted that that their process doesn't even result in one specific concrete plan like many other IRPs do. It just produces a range of possibilities, which she then said, and I quote, "The lack of a preferred plan eliminates accountability from utility planning. What's the point of having a range of options if you don't even really analyze which one you're going to use and then have that up for debate?" She described the TVA process as merely a thought exercise. The way it is right now, it's got no teeth, and there's nothing really for TVA to answer to. So next we had Peter Hubbard of Georgia Clean Energy Solutions, who's still with us today. Thanks a lot for showing up today, Peter. He discussed about TVA's over-reliance on fossil gas resources and how that results in increased costs and decreased reliability. He honed in on the discrepancies between their last IRP in 2019, where it said that TVA would pursue 3.5 gigawatts of new gas, which they're still building, but before this next IRP is out, the next resource planning process, they've got almost 6.5 gigawatts of gas in the pipeline. So that's almost 3 gigawatts of gas that was not in the last IRP that they're actively planning to build right now. What's the point of having a resource planning process if you build resources outside of the planning process? Next, we had Taylor Allred from Greenlink Analytics. His testimony focused on environmental justice and energy burden and how that shows up in the state of Tennessee and what TVA can do about it. So energy burden is defined as the percentage of a household's income that is spent on their energy bills. If someone is spending more than 6% of their total income on their energy bills, we consider that unaffordable. His group, Greenlink's Analytic, did some in-depth analysis on Memphis and found that they in particular have some of the highest energy burden rates in the country, and that Tennessee in general has extremely high energy burden rates. That is a real problem that we need to fix. He used their mapping tools to that can correlate energy burden with other sociodemographic data and found that there's a meaningful correlation between high rates of energy burden and neighborhoods that are predominantly Black and neighborhoods that are predominantly Latinx. He also found that there's a distinct correlation between high energy burden rates and high asthma rates. So energy burden, having too much energy that's too expensive is not just an energy thing, it's a racial justice thing, it's a health justice thing. He did note that TVA is recently announced $1.5 billion of spending on energy efficiency in the next couple of years, which is a good improvement from previous cycles, but is nowhere near enough what TVA needs to be doing. Their previous analysis on Memphis itself found that to get energy burdens in Memphis to an affordable level would require $1 to $1.5 billion itself. So TVA spending is only enough for Memphis, really, and not enough for the rest of the state. So it needs to be really ramped up. And last, we had another person named Taylor McNair, with a different nonprofit called Grid Lab. They use a sophisticated modeling tool, actually the same modeling tool that TVA is using for their resource plan, but they use different inputs, different data, and different methods, which is exactly what like a formal process would allow folks like his group or others to do. They produce a 100% clean energy scenario and a high distributed energy resource scenario, which is like rooftop solar and battery storage. And they found both of these are cost effective and achieve the goals that we want to see. Specifically, he found that the 100% clean energy scenario would not only meet reliability needs, but it would save up to $255 billion with a B by 2035. A lot of that savings comes from just the reduced fuel costs from not having to run as many fossil fuel plants and for having EVs and building electrification that runs on cheaper electricity. There's also over $27 billion in health savings, and it would reduce energy burden for everyone in Tennessee to affordable levels. So that's, I think, a really great example of what would happen if TVA had the types of processes that we're advocating for, is that other folks would come in with all these ideas about different ways to model the system, different ways of approaching the energy system, and can show viable alternatives that TVA is not going to go out and do on their own. So that was, in summary, what we talked about earlier today. And then I think we're going to quickly end with another exciting announcement from Congressman Steve Cohen that serves part of Memphis, who also had recorded remarks and has a super exciting announcement towards the end that is very relevant to what we're talking about today. So. Thank you. Should I just talk about it? Okay, I think I'm just going to tell you. I'm just going to talk about it because we're here. Stay in front of the camera. All right. So Representative Steve Cohen, that represents, again, part of Memphis, who's been advocating for stricter standards for TVA for a long time, is planning to introduce a bill on Monday to the U.S. Congress called the forgive me, I don't remember the acronym of the bill, but it's intended to increase transparency and ERP is the acronym that is intended to increase transparency and accountability for the TVA resource planning process. So it would require them to host public hearings, to allow people to intervene in a formal process, to get that data and to provide that modeling analysis. So it would go a really long way to holding TVA more accountable to their resource plan, which they're currently not accountable at all whatsoever. So forgive me for not remembering the acronym off the top of my head, but it's super duper exciting news because that's exactly what we're here to advocate for, is more transparency and accountability. So I believe they're introducing that on Monday, and we will follow up with more details on that. Reach out to your representatives, give them a call, shout it out on social media because it's a huge opportunity. Great. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Gabby to kick it off for the community discussion.
Great. All right. Well, thanks to Jake and then, of course, to Representative Cohen for sharing such an exciting announcement about the upcoming bill. So now we're going to be turning it over to you all. For the next hour, you'll get a chance to talk with other folks in this room about issues that you care about, from transparency and TVA's gas build out to utility bill affordability and climate concerns. But before we go into those breakout rooms, we first want to establish some community agreements that we've pasted right here on this piece of paper. So just to go through each one of them, and I don't know, JT, if you want to. Oh, yeah. Okay, great. So number one, step up, step back. So if you are usually quieter in breakout spaces, challenge yourself, and we encourage you to take up a little bit more space and share. And if you usually share more than others, be mindful to leave room for quieter voices. Number two, one mic. In other words, only one person speaks at a time. 3, respect each other's opinions, even and especially if you don't agree with them. And 4, be conscious of intent versus impact. No matter your intention, you are responsible for your impact. So with that, I think we're going to split off from the Zoom at this point. Great. So we're going to move into actually doing a report back from each of the 3 breakout rooms. And so maybe we'll start with breakout room. Who had the green and blue signs here? Oh. Yeah, do you want to share out first? I can hold up the papers. Okay. It's just the first one, really, because there's a summary.
All right, this is a summary of what Group 2 said that we would like to share with TVA. The blue at the bottom is our summary. We would like for TVA to be more open to proposed local actions and solutions, especially from local power companies. We don't want to see any more gas builds, really no gas at all. It's kind of a summary. And making that decision because it's a good financial decision in addition to other things. Our group said we want the TVA board, they should be taking more responsibility, not just always accepting what reports from the staff, the TVA staff are saying. So we want to see more opportunities for the board to do more. And for the board to actually have staff to do that independently or be able to get consultants to do that independently from the TVA. We would like to see actual transparency in the IRP process. We would like TVA to take advantage of the opportunities with the Inflation Reduction Act. And if TVA does all these things, just a reminder to TVA that it could be a model for the whole country. Anything else from Group 2 that I might have missed?
Oh, did you want to add something? Okay, well, I'll just repeat that because the live stream couldn't hear. But for TVA to do more localized solar, or yeah, local subsidized solar. Okay, all right, so now we'll do group 1. Where is, Sadiq, do you want to hold these up? Okay. So yeah, an hour is definitely not enough time to get through everything. So we talked about a lot of things. We spent a lot of time talking about the issues around lack of transparency with TVA's IRP. Some kind of key takeaways are, folks came to this and this is this event, and this is the first time they heard about the IRP or learned about what an IRP is. And there's just not a lot of information that TVA puts out there about the IRP. So announcements about public comment, meetings, that kind of stuff. So there's a key role that the media actually plays in sharing these announcements, or can play in getting the word out to the public. So another issue we talked about was that TVA always has to be in full control. And so this is a big hindrance to, I guess, people feeling comfortable talking about the IRP or engaging in the process. One great idea that somebody had was around the role of local power companies in helping communities engage on the IRP. So, the local power company can hold a meeting where their customers can share input on the draft IRP, which they can then share with TVA. So using the local power companies as a way to put pressure on TVA or raise concerns. Let's see. What is this one? Oh, TVA.
TVA needs a mandate from a higher power to do better.
Okay. Yeah, so TVA is not really accountable to anyone. And there's really no mandate for them to do meaningful public engagement. So there needs to be some sort of mandate from somebody above TVA to do this. The exciting thing is the Cohen bill kind of gets to that point, which is great. All right, we talked about the local power company discussions. We also talked about lots of concern around gas buildouts, and folks brought up the idea of there should be solar on parking lots, on big box stores, on local buildings, and lots of rooftop solar. Yeah, anything else I'm missing, or folks in the group who?
LPC engagement, I think, around like your local co-ops and munis, like pressuring them to talk to TVA because TVA sees the LPCs as their primary customers, not us as ratepayers.
Group 3.
Yeah, we also took a lot of notes. So I'm going to read some of our big takeaways. One thing that we talked about that other people mentioned was accessibility. If you have ever tried to go to a TVA board meeting or anything like that, the language is not accessible. It's not accessible to the public. I can't understand some of it, and many other people can't. And we believe that they should hold more concurrent sessions in different parts of the state. And elsewhere as well, so that you don't have to go on an entire road trip to go to a meeting, because you shouldn't have to do that. We talked specifically about having local committees for East, Middle, and West Tennessee, and holding concurrent sessions that are talking about the same things and that are accessible to the public in understandable language. We did also talk a bit about appealing to local power companies. And then someone had an interesting idea of trying to sort of use leverage against TVA when some of their contracts are ending, since they make like 20-year contracts, trying to do research on that in advance and put leverage on them in that way. And then we also had an interesting conversation about bills and wanting to empower the public to understand their bills, because many people do not. And there is a severe lack of accessibility around people being able to pay their bills locally and understanding where that money is going to. And also we need to empower people, and TVA needs to be more proactive about empowering people to understand how they can make their energy more efficient and understand the benefits they can get from the Inflation Reduction Act. And in that same note, we also talked about how TVA really needs to take advantage of the IRA incentives. It's frankly such a shame that they are not, because they could be saving so much money, and therefore we could be saving so much money. That is a 10-year time span, and we're already about a year and a half into it. So there's a lot of urgency, and we need to push them to make that shift now, as well as have sort of a campaign to educate the public on the IRA, because that has thus far not been super accessible, and many people don't know about the benefits that they're missing out on because the TVA is not accessible to them. And then finally, we talked about gas plant expansion as well, as I think everyone did. Pretty much an elephant in the room here. We don't want more gas plants because they're bad. And we also talked a bit about having a just transition to clean energy and promoting job training for people as we move away from coal-powered plants and things like that. That's
great. Anyone else in the group?
Yeah, if anyone else in our group had anything we missed, feel free to shout it out. But
all right. Thank you, everybody. Hi, once again, my name is JT Neal. I'm here with Sunrise Nashville. I would like, as I close this out, to just express my gratitude to everybody who's here in person and virtually. I just want to express gratitude to all the volunteers, and just, yeah, a round of applause, everybody. We've done a thing today. As we close, I would like to remind everyone that this hearing was organized on the principle that TVA can be a great agent for good for the communities it was set up to serve. While it has issues that need resolution, it's paramount that we all walk away fully aware that TVA is not evil. It's not on the right path for the communities that it serves. And that's what we need to remember. We need to keep this with us as we go back out into the world. The decisions and the actions of TVA have a large impact on the day-to-day lives of over 10 million people. The events of today and similar events of this kind are important because of that. So we do ask that all of you participating, virtually, in person, we ask that you continue to do so. Your comments, your opinions, they matter, and it is vital that you continue to give them, both to organizations like those, I almost said mine, but organizations that are involved in this kind of work, as well as the TVA itself. Right. Later on this spring, TVA will be releasing its draft IRP. We ask that everyone give a comment, call your friends, call your neighbors, call everybody you know who's here in the Valley to also give a comment. We need as much public engagement as possible to continue to move TVA onto the right path. We also ask that you engage with your congressional delegation, right? With the TVA IRP Act, we have a real chance to create a lasting impact that will move us back onto that path of people power. So please remember as you go that we're all in this world together, whether we want to be or not. So we might as well be constructive and helpful to each other, to those around us. Leonard Nimoy once said, "The miracle is this: the more we share, the more we have." So please continue to share your thoughts, your opinions, and your needs. Please have a wonderful rest of your evening and be safe. Thank you very much. Oh, and if we can, if we could have everybody come up and we just take just a quick picture so that we can share it around and let TVA and the world know that we're here. We're here doing the work. Yeah.